I came home after a 5-day business trip, but the first thing that greeted me was a flock of crows tearing through my bags on the lawn in front of the house. Next to them, my leather suitcase was slashed open, as if someone had done it on purpose. Like an insult. Everything I owned, clothes, books, even family photos, was scattered across the dew-damp grass. No note, no email. Just absolute silence. The house I once called my home now shut its doors to me like I never existed. And I knew immediately. This had all been planned. My name is Rebecca Monroe, 34, and I work in digital marketing in Seattle. I had just finished a 5-day conference in Austin. A big career step, since it was the first time I was invited as a keynote speaker instead of just taking notes in the audience. I was excited to come home and share everything with my partner, Daniel, 39. The man I believed was still asleep on the couch with our dog, just like every other time I was away. But no. What awaited me were my personal belongings thrown out like trash on the front lawn. At first, I thought we'd been robbed. But then I noticed the locks had been changed. The mailbox was empty. There were no signs of forced entry. Everything was orderly. Everything except me. I had been removed from that order. I knocked 3 times. No answer. I tried calling Daniel, his phone was off. I texted my cousin, who lived nearby and usually helped watch the house when I was away. No response. It was like the whole neighborhood had collectively decided to pretend I no longer existed. I sat down on the cold front steps, the early morning breeze from the lake blowing my hair into a mess. It was 7:12 a.m., and I realized I had nowhere to go. We'd lived together for nearly 6 years. Not legally married, but everything was under Daniel's name. From the lease, utilities, even the car I drove every day. I used to think love was enough, that we didn't need legal ties. That was a mistake. He held all the power. I was just the live-in. For the first 3 years, I carried most of the financial load after Daniel lost his job when his company went under. I never complained. Worked 10-hour days, came home to cook, do laundry, pay rent on time. But once I started becoming more successful than him, things changed. He grew distant, controlling, constantly mocking my job as playing on social media for petty cash. I'd thought about leaving. But every time I did, he'd apologize, be sweet again. And I'd give in. This time he didn't need apologies. He just needed to throw me away. I didn't cry. Didn't scream. I just slowly gathered my things into a bag. The high heels I bought with my first bonus, my sticker-covered laptop, the photo frame of me and my mom back when she was still alive. When the Uber I called pulled up, the driver gave me a strange look. He was probably thinking, another girl kicked out of her house. I just smiled. He didn't know. I had another home. A place Daniel and no one else ever knew about. And this time I wasn't just going back to live. I was going back to start over. In a way they could never imagine. I didn't look back as the Uber rolled away from the old neighborhood. I felt no bitterness. Just a quiet emptiness, like I had finally taken off a suffocating costume I'd worn for far too long. My destination was a small wooden house, about an hour outside downtown Seattle, in Falls City, a place people often call the edge between forest and city. I bought that house 2.5 years ago, under the name of the freelance media company I secretly built back when Daniel started belittling my work. Back then I just thought, I need a place to run to when everything falls apart. And sure enough, it all fell apart. The little 2-story house with a black tin roof sat tucked inside a patch of fern-covered woods. It wasn't fancy or big, but every inch of it was chosen and designed by me. From the curtains to the stove. I'd quietly come here on weekends when Daniel was out of town, or whenever I lied about leaving early for a work trip. The key was still in the stone crevice beneath the frangipani pot by the porch. I stepped inside, closed the door behind me, and for the first time in years, I felt truly safe. In the days that followed, I spoke to no one. No posts, no calls, no messages. I disappeared from every shared group chat. Even my family didn't know where I was. Daniel didn't try to find me. I figured he assumed I'd come crawling back or try to talk things out. But I didn't. I threw myself completely into work. My freelance media company, Maple North Media, had started as a side project, helping small businesses build their brand on social media. But now, with the recognition I gained from the Austin conference, collaboration offers started pouring in. I signed my first $28,000 contract, then the second, then the third. I hired a remote assistant, a bookkeeper, and began expanding the content creation team. No one on the team knew where I lived. All they knew was that I was the mysterious founder, who always replied to emails on time and had the uncanny ability to turn a no-name coffee shop into a statewide brand in just 3 months. One evening, while reworking a campaign for a bakery in Oregon, I received an email from Cassandra, Daniel's cousin. "Rebecca, are you okay? What happened to you? Daniel said you left without a word. But you know what, lately he seems off. Like he's losing control." I leaned back and exhaled. Their world was beginning to realize that I was no longer the predictable one. I didn't reply to that email. About 3 months later, I heard through an old industry friend that Daniel was looking for investors for a new real estate project. It was an eco-apartment complex near Westlake, but it had run into legal troubles and was short on funding. My friend emphasized, "That company's in deep trouble. They need capital fast or the bank's going to shut them down this quarter." Smiled. Not out of spite. Just because sometimes life knows how to complete its own circle. I reached out to a financial partner and proposed an investment, not in the real estate project, but in acquiring full ownership of Daniel's construction company under the name Maple North Media, with one condition. He must never know the investor's identity. All the paperwork was legal. And once the deal was finalized, I became the majority owner of the company Daniel had co-founded with 2 friends 5 years ago. He had no idea. All he received was an email. "Congratulations, your company has been restructured. You will soon meet with the new investor representative." I looked out through the glass window. It was drizzling. The damp scent of forest filled the air, fresh and gentle. I had once been thrown out of my house like garbage. But now I was sitting in my small wooden loft, owner of one of the fastest-growing media firms in the Northwest, and I was about to step back into my old world, this time as the one in charge. I wasn't seeking revenge. I didn't need to hurt anyone. I was simply doing what I should have done years ago, choosing myself. I didn't enter the meeting room right away. I stood in the hallway on the 15th floor of a building in downtown Seattle, looking through the clear glass at the rush of people below. My heart wasn't racing. My hands weren't shaking. But I knew, in just a few minutes, I would face Daniel again, the man who once threw me out without a word, and now would have to sign the papers confirming I was the majority shareholder of his company. The door opened. An assistant invited me in. Daniel was already seated. White shirt, gray tie. Hair neatly combed like always during business meetings. But his eyes had lost their usual confidence. Beside him were his 2 former co-founders and a legal representative. All of them were waiting for the new investor. I walked in, my heels clicking softly on the wooden floor. Daniel looked up, stunned. It took a few seconds before he managed to say, "Rebecca." I didn't sit down immediately. I just smiled slightly and handed the legal rep a folder. "We have a few things to wrap up. I don't plan to spend too much time here." No one said a word. The whole room froze as if time had stopped. The legal rep began explaining the agreed-upon terms. Maple North Media, the company I owned, now held 62% of the shares, and I was the acting executive. Daniel didn't object. He just sat there, fingers tightening around his pen, lips pressed into a hard line. I sat down and looked straight at him. Not with anger. Not with sarcasm. Just a calm gaze, like facing an old acquaintance. Someone who once mattered, but now was just a memory. "You don't have to sign if you don't want to," said. "But if you don't, the company will lose the investment, and the bank agreement will be void. Course the choice is yours." Daniel looked at me, and for the first time in years, there was no control or disdain in his eyes. He simply whispered, "You planned this all along, didn't you?" I stayed silent for a moment, then softly said, "No, I only planned to survive. The opportunity found its way to me when you pushed me out the door." He lowered his head. The meeting ended in silence. I left the room without looking back. But less than 2 minutes later, hurried footsteps echoed behind me. "Rebecca, wait. Stop." Daniel stood there, no longer looking composed. He was no longer the man who once confidently told me I should be grateful to live in his house. "I'm not here to apologize," he began. "I know it wouldn't mean anything now. But I misjudged you. I never thought you'd actually leave." I smiled gently. "You're right. I didn't dare back then. But you were wrong to think I'd never change. You really have changed." He nodded. "You're not the woman I used to know." I looked at him one last time. "No, I'm still me. I'm just not small anymore." And then I walked away. Light, as if I'd never carried anything heavy on my back. In the months that followed, I didn't appear publicly as the company's leader. I simply guided the company toward a more sustainable, ethical direction. Something Daniel never cared about. I gave former employees the chance to stay, as long as they were willing to change. I didn't post the story online. No comeback photos, no sweet revenge captions. I didn't need recognition. I didn't need anyone to know. Because the most important thing was, I had returned to myself. One late autumn afternoon, I drove back to the little house in the woods. A soft, vibrant jazz tune played on the radio. I parked the car, grabbed my bag, and stepped up the wooden porch. A chilly breeze rustled through the leaves. A squirrel darted past, as if welcoming me home. The house was still the same, simple, quiet. But I was not. I set the kettle on the stove, opened my laptop, and typed the first words of a new project. A platform to connect women who had once been pushed out of someone else's life, but stood back up without anyone's help. I called the project Backdoor Queens. Because some people, even when pushed out the front door, will always find a way back. And this time they'll enter through a door they built themselves. Rebecca's story isn't just about overcoming pain. It's proof that sometimes, being cast out of the place you once called home, is the very push you need to rediscover your strongest self. In real life, we sometimes have to hit rock bottom to understand our worth. And rise again on our own 2 feet. Don't be afraid when a door closes. See it as a sign to build a stronger one. This time with your key in the lock. What do you think about Rebecca's decision? Would you do the same if you were in her shoes? Share your thoughts below. And don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful real-life stories about love, family, and resilience.